resources? Well, that's a question we'll find out when we come back. We discuss that after the break. Soon come. All right, folks, due to recent events regarding the clearing of Fort Rocky for parking at events, there's been a debate about the lack of consultation before making changes to this vital natural resource. With us this morning is Mr. Lenroy James, an environmental consultant from LDJ and Company Limited. Sir Lenroy, good morning. Welcome to Smile. How are you?
Good morning.
Hi, good morning. Good morning. Thank you for having me. Good morning to your viewers as well.
LDJ and Company, tell me about that first before we get to the meat of the matter.
All right, so LDJ & Co, we're an environmental management consultancy here in Jamaica. We do environmental impact assessments, we do mold mitigation and management, feasibility studies, and even environmental policy development. We also manage vegetation, endemic species, those sorts of things. So we are a full-service environmental management consultancy company.
Yep. You know, this morning, Janella and I, we were speaking about the fact that the government wants to turn Portmore into a parish. It might sound like I'm getting crazy here. But, and I said to her, are the folks upset because they weren't consulted, or are they upset because it's the wrong thing to do? Same question to you. Is there a problem because you guys were not consulted? Well, maybe you were, maybe, I don't know. Or was it the wrong thing that we're talking about here?
All right, so when you have situations like these, what happens is that, first of all, the site in question is a protected area. It has mangroves there. What mangroves do is that they protect the coastline. They are a habitat for juvenile fish and all of that. So it's a little bit broader than just not having consultation.
Okay.
The NRCA Act speaks to what is supposed to happen in areas like this. There's supposed to be permits are supposed to be applied for beforehand, and there are steps that must be taken. So part of that application process and part of the feasibility work that would be done if an environmental impact assessment is done, there's a component of that for community consultation. So you would automatically have the consultation coming as a part of the deliverables if you're actually going through the steps as they ought to go through.
Okay.
So in the case of Fort Rocky, who are the stakeholders which should have been consulted in the first place?
Well, first and foremost, at Fort Rocky, the very, very, very first stop should have been with the regulators. So that would be NRCA, NEPA, that sort of thing. Sorry. That should be the very, very, very first stop. Once you get to that space, what will then happen is that the application process will take place, and then you now have the other agencies and stakeholders, because the Act does, the NRC Act, it does speak to what is supposed to happen. So even though we're talking about the NRC Act from 1991, and we can always have the conversation that at this point in time, we may need to revisit it and probably tighten it up a little bit in 21st century terms and bring it more in line with where we're going as a country that is suffering the impacts of climate change. But the very, very first stop would be the application process. And then from there now, you move out from there to have the sort of stakeholders and the engagement and the necessary studies to realize what would really be the impacts of doing this. Do you really have to do this way? And is there a sustainable way that this can be done as well?
Okay, so Neville, what I realize that has happened, it's obvious that we're doing it in the reversed way. So we've seen, for example, where this week we heard that so that area that was cleared for the car park has now been secured with a hope that the natural habitat, i.e. the mangroves and the fauna and flora could come back. Is that the right thing to do, though?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. And then the issue with something like this is that policymakers are the actors in this sort of thing. And while we can argue the point that public education may not be at the highest level, so we can probably do some more with that, but policymakers that are going out and doing things backwards. Because if we talk about mangroves, for example,
yes,
there are some mangroves that grow in certain conditions, that once you remove those mangroves, they will not grow back and nothing else will grow back. They grow actually very slow.
Wow.
The mangroves, they also protect our coastline, as I said earlier. It mitigates against flooding, that sort of thing, erosion, and it is a functioning habitat for the fish that we like to eat.
So, sorry, Neves.
No problem.
So how long would it take, though, that I'm not sure if you are familiar with that space that was cleared, but how long, though, will it take to get back to its former glory? Because quite a bit
Wow.
of that space has been cleared for that car park.
Well, it's going to be difficult to actually just pull down a time for it to be restored. At this point, we'd have to do a little bit more research into it. But again, we come back to the NRCA Act again, right? It also empowers the minister, where the minister can instruct the JCF to enter the premises and ensure that it is put back to where it ought to be. Now, it may very well be that getting it restored to what it should be might be a significant cost. Is it that's going to be the trade-off? But we're having this conversation again, and I'm going to just remind you real quick. Last year, January, we had a very similar conversation about an issue, same permit breaches, no permits, that sort of thing, happening in the St. Andrew area. So we kind of have to start to take a serious look at what is it that we really intend to do about this. Because the country attends the COP meetings and all that, and we have these fantastic conversations in those spaces. But when it comes down to the nitty-gritty on the ground, Jamaica has even benefited from grant funding to repopulate mangroves in Jamaica. And have actors who ought to know better that are going out there now and just removing these things. And let me just put something in perspective for you. One of the fines under the NRCA Act for a breach such as this would be about 50,000 Jamaican dollars or maybe two years in prison. And yes, 50,000 Jamaican dollars in 2025. It's quite likely that the cost to rent the heavy equipment to put on the site, to clear it, costs more than $50,000.
Yeah.
So,
Sir Lemroy, here's the issue that I have, because the folks who decided to make this a parking lot are folks who should know that it shouldn't have been done.
correct.
And obviously you can't think for them, and I'm not asking you to think for them, but in a sense, maybe I am. But why would that happen, though, if you know that, as you said, protected area, didn't get permission, but then it came from the minister that this is a entertainment zone and parking lot and stuff. So is there a suggestion here that the minister didn't understand all that we're talking about now?
Boy, I tell you, like I said, I can't speak for the conversations that happened. I can't speak for who said what and who did what. But what is clear is that the site was cleared without the proper protocols. And I don't believe that the average Jamaican or any Jamaican gets up and sets out to break the law. But when you look at what happens, this is a technical breach of legislation. You would expect that the actors in this case, being government entities, ought to know better or ought to have persons in the space who would know better and know that, look,
that's my point. That's my
anything
point.
that you're doing, you exactly. And so what I think we need to do now is we need to ask every Jamaican to sort of be an enforcement agent, or if you want to say enforcement informer. If you see something happening and you don't see a sign at the front with environmental permit details, say something, right? Reach out to somebody, because they're literally paving paradise to put up a parking lot. And you know that song that Counting Crows did.
Yeah.
That's exactly what they're doing.
Your own view, Lenroy, on making Fort Rocky an entertainment zone.
I think it is a fantastic idea. We can have the entertainment zone there. We can also have eco-friendly solutions that are put in place for it as well. So, and we need these sorts of things as well. We need the entertainment zones, but we don't have to do it at the detriment of the environment. So let us just do things properly. You have a lot of local companies with the expertise and the capacity that can go in, look at it, make recommendations, say, all right, this is what you want to do. this is how we can approach, this is how we should do it. We can even look at, say, having what we could term a nil net loss type situation, where if you're going to cause any form of impact to the environment, you have to have some form of mitigation method in place. While I don't agree with taking out fully grown mature mangroves and then replacing it somewhere else with seedlings, saplings, and that sort of thing, there are ways that we can look at to get it done properly. So it's a very unfortunate thing and a very, very, very sad state of affairs that this is where we are now, and we have to be having almost the same conversation again, just a little bit over a year into this thing. And I'd just like to say that for where we sit though, we are actively engaged with a group to look at, we're actually assisting to write policies now that we are going to be sharing with government to see how it is that we can strengthen the support, not just for the environment, but we are also looking at it from the perspective of young persons and young professionals and that sort of thing, how we can all come together to make sure that this thing works. Because at the end of the day, we're the ones who have to live here. Small island developing states like Jamaica, we suffer the most impacts from climate change and poor environmental practices. Even though they'll always argue the point that we're not one of the largest polluters. But when you look at it in the grand scheme of things, our environmental policies are fragmented. You have different agencies that are administering different components of it. And what you really need is we really need a robust environmental management organization that is sufficiently resourced and able to take this in. And persons need to fear the penalties.
All right.
Because if it will cost you more to rent the equipment than it is than what the fine is going to be.
All
it may just be worthwhile to do.
We have to go. Well explained. Good to see you, Bridget. Hopefully we won't be talking about. Hopefully we won't be talking about it
next year.
Next year again. Good to
we
see.
can talk about remote mitigation next time. Thanks so much. Have a great one, guys.
Blessings.
Thank you.
Environmental consultant, Mr. Lenroy James.
Now, coming up next, we discuss teacher well-being and working conditions, catalysts for quality teaching.
Soon come.